right now, player of the year to me could be Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers. He's been their best receiver, their best running back. Welcome to Just the Stats, NFL Top 10's for Wednesday. So we're going to continue looking at the stats from this last weekend, the top 10's in various categories. We'll wrap up that, and then we'll move into looking at the standings, see how things have changed. There's always changes, and pretty interesting. Like, for example, the stats for the standings for, say, the Kansas City Chiefs, and some of these divisions have tightened up as well. So we'll take a look at that. But we will pick back up with the receivers. I should have done this one particular stat yesterday, but I didn't, so I'll finish it up. And that's receiving touchdowns. We'll pick that up right there. So, receiving touchdowns. Brock Bowers and Drake London both had 3 receiving touchdowns. And unfortunately for their teams, the Raiders and the Falcons, respectively, they both lost. Davante Adams had another 2 touchdowns. He has been incredible. And if you saw my Monday podcast, you see that he's moving up the charts all time in most receiving touchdowns. He's pushing number 5 right now. I think that's the next one up for him. So he's been so impressive as far as the touchdowns he gets. You're not going to see him up in there in the leading receivers as total receptions, but touchdowns you are. We'll look at that when we look at the season leaders tomorrow. But yeah, those are some of the top ones this past week. Now, over this season, like I said, Davante Adams has had a 3-touchdown game as well. In week 7, he had 3 touchdowns. There's only 4 times going into this last weekend where a wide receivers had at least 3 touchdown passes. But with the 2 by Drake London for the Falcons and Brock Bowers for the Raiders, we now have 6 players who have had 3 touchdowns in a single game. No repeating wide receivers yet as far as 3 go. And I bet if I had to pick one, I'd pick Adams, but we'll see what happens. Believe it or not, this is incredible. 36 times so far this season, a player has had 2 receiving touchdowns in a single game. That's a ton, I think. I mean, when you have 2 touchdowns in a single game, that's good, but it's happened 36 times. And 6 times it's happened with 3. So amazing to me. All right, now let's look at running back receptions. Chase Brown and Bijan Robinson led the NFL this past weekend with 8 receptions. Now, Chase Brown had 75 yards on his, while Robinson for the Falcons had 50. And again, this does not equate to wins because they both their teams lost, as did Devon Achane, who had 6 receptions for 39 yards for the Dolphins. That was also in a loss. Now, Christian McCaffrey is up here again. Every week he seems to be in the top 10. He had 5 this week for 67 yards and a touchdown. That was a big touchdown because it moves him one closer to overtaking, I believe, LaDainian Tomlinson for all-time touchdown receptions in the NFL by a running back, that is. So those are some of your top receptions. Then there was some players with 5 and 4. Now, over the season, those 2, Robinson for the Falcons and Brown for the Bengals with 8 receptions, put them right there at number 8 and number 9 position. Actually, they're tied for 4th because there's been 6 times that a player's had 8 receptions, but they jumped into that top 10 list. Still at number 1 are Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers with 10 and Jahmyr Gibbs for the Falcons with 10. They only 2 with 10 receptions. Then Christian McCaffrey had 9, and he's had 8. He's on this list 3 times. He's been very impressive. Like I said, and when you look at the stats, he's been racking up more receiving yards than rushing yards. Though he did have more, he had over 100 yards rushing this week, but still, and then he had another 67. So he'll probably be one of our top, when we get to it, top players as far as total yards go. Not quite number one, though. All right, now looking at running back receiving yards, Chase Brown, like I said, for the Bengals had 75 in a loss. And then Christian McCaffrey had 49 for the 49ers, had 67 yards. And then drops way back as far as the rest of the NFL. I mean, you had a couple players with 50 and 51, but that's it. But 75 yards to go along with, for Brown, for the Bengals, to go along with his rushing yards is good. You know, I mean, you love to see those players out of the backfield who can also catch passes. Now, none of those numbers were good enough this past week to make it into the top 10. In fact, there hasn't been a player. One time, Jahmyr Gibbs had 82 yards in week 7, but since week 5, there hasn't been a player in the top 10. I'm not sure what that means, but that's the case. We've already had 3 players, though, as far as running backs go, who have had at least 100 yards receiving in a single game. You know, that's impressive. Bijan Robinson had 106 for the Falcons in week 4 in a win. That's the number one total so far this season. Kind of going through these a little quickly, but we'll get to the standings next. All right, now yards from scrimmage. That was Kyle Mononegay for the Bears. He had 176 yards rushing, but then he had another 22 yards receiving. So he had 198 yards this weekend. That's the number one player. Christian McCaffrey, like I said, was number 2 with 173. Those are your top 2 players. There's a big drop to Rico Dowdle, who had 141. He had 130 yards rushing and then 11 yards receiving. Now, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the first wide receiver on this list, he had 140 yards to come in 4th so far this season. And then 5th, Brock Bowers for the Raiders. Let me see. Nope. He's one of 2 tight ends on this list. Colston Loveland for the Bears had 118 yards, which was good enough to make it into the top 10, which kind of says you didn't have any big games except by a couple of players. I mean, there's a big drop from Rico Dowdle with 141 to Christian McCaffrey with 173. I mean, that's a 32-yard difference between the second place person and the third place person. And then even Kyle McGonaghy had 25 yards on Christian McCaffrey. So really nobody big except for those 2, Mononegay and McCaffrey, as far as yards from scrimmage this past week. And only Mononegay's 198 yards is good enough to make it into the top 10 yards from scrimmage games this season. Number 1 is Rico Dowdle, who, like I was talking about yesterday for the Panthers, they're happy to get him back in that lead role. And he had, I think he was, what did I just say, 3rd last week, or this last weekend, but not good enough to make it into the top 10. Rico Dowdle, like I said, 239 yards, total yards from scrimmage in week 6. And that same week, in week 6, Bijan Robinson for the Falcons had 238. So just 1 yard separated the two of them in week 6. Pretty impressive. But Kyle Mononegay, I like the name. I don't always say it right. For the Bears, had 198 yards, which put him at number 8 so far this season. We got 7 players who've had more than 200 yards from scrimmage this season. And Rico Dowdle's done it twice. He's the only one so far who's been on this list twice as far as 200 or more yards from scrimmage. Okay, those are a look at some of our stats. Now, we're going to shift over to looking at the standings. And we'll start with the AFC East. The New England Patriots are 7-2. Buffalo Bills are 6-2. The Patriots are on a 6-game winning streak. So that means they were 1-2 and now 7-2. Pretty impressive. The Bills, they were 4-0. Then they lost 2 games, and now they're 6-2. So they've, on a 2-game winning streak, they've really bounced back from those back-to-back losses. And then you have the Miami Dolphins at 2-7 and the New York Jets at 1-7. So they're bringing up the rear here, and they're out of it basically as far as any chance in the division or in the, playoffs period. They're going to have to look to next year for some beefing up. Miami Dolphins, who knows what's going to happen? They're dumping players. I see they made a trade with the Eagles. So we'll see what happens with them. But not only the players that will be left on the team for next year, but coaching staff as well. We'll see what happens there. But Patriots in first place, Buffalo Bills in second, and they still have to play each other again. The Patriots have played one more game, but they're in first place because they lead in this division. They're 2-0 in the division. Buffalo Bills are 2-1. So that's what gives the lead to the Patriots. They're really something. These two teams, and the loss for the Bills was against the Patriots is another reason, obviously. Head-to-head competition, the Patriots beat the Bills. But in these two teams are so close. So the New England Patriots have scored 237 points. The Bills, though, one less game, have 235. The New England Patriots have given up 169 points, and the Buffalo Bills in one less game have given up 167. So very close, those two teams. All right, let's move to the AFC North. This had really tightened up last week when the Pittsburgh Steelers lost and the Ravens won. But Pittsburgh Steelers came back with a big win over the Indianapolis Colts to knock them out of their spot as the number one team, according to me. They won't be next week. When we look at this for probably tomorrow or Friday, I'll share my top 10 list of top 10s in the NFL going into week 10. But Pittsburgh Steelers did pull out a win over the Colts. Ravens are now on a 2-game winning streak, so they've went from 1-5 to 3-5. Pittsburgh Steelers are 5-3, so there's still a 2-game lead by the Steelers, but they'll play again. And so the Ravens have a chance. And now with, Lamar Jackson back, and if their defense starts to improve, they have a shot at it. The Steelers, to me, I don't know. They look pretty good against the Colts. Their defense looked better than they have pretty much the entire season, so we'll see what happens. They've only allowed 155 points, even though their defense hasn't looked that great. They're not giving up a lot of points, so they may be better than they look at this point in time. And I think that Aaron Rodgers has been kind of a pleasant surprise. I wasn't really sure how good he was going to be. He's still got that short passing game going, quick releases. It's a winning method, but you'd kind of like to see it down the field a little bit more instead of everything so, like within the 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. Everything seems to happen right there for the Steelers. So Steelers first place, Baltimore Ravens second, Cincinnati Bengals at 3-6, Cleveland Browns at 2-6. The Bengals offense did the best they could to win a game, but they just couldn't do it. They've scored 216 points, given up 300 points. That's crazy. I mean, that's just terrible. Their defense gave up 47 again. You just can't do that and expect to win. In fact, they said I heard a stat where first team ever to score 30-something points in a game 2 weeks in a row and lose both the games. Not a stat you like to hear. Cleveland Browns, they just don't have an offense. They've only scored 126 points this season. Their defense is good, giving up 184 points. But, when your defense is on the field that much, you're going to give up points. You're just spending too much time on the field. All right, let's look at the AFC South. This has tightened up a little bit. The Colts were a 3-game lead over the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for the Jacksonville Jaguars, this was a great week. They won, and everybody else in the division lost. Colts lost, Texans lost, Titans lost. Not that the Titans are really in it because they're only 1-8. But now the Indianapolis Colts dropped their first loss in a while. They're 7-2. Jacksonville Jaguars are now 5-3. Houston Texans are 3-5. And the Tennessee Titans are 1-8. Now, the Colts are 2-0 in the division, and the Jaguars are 1-0. They play the Texans. This could pretty much cement the demise of the Texans. If the Jaguars go into Houston on Sunday and beat them, that'll put the Jaguars at 6-3 and the Houston Texans at 3-6. And not only that, the Jaguars will have beat them twice in the season. So this is a big game for both teams, the Texans, and I don't even know yet if Stroud's going to play. If he's not going to play, it's going to be very hard for the Texans. Their defense is incredibly good, but their offense is not. And if Stroud's not in there, it's just that much worse. Their team has only given up 121 points so far this season. Jaguars, who are 5-3, have given up 184 points and only scored 176. That's not good. They're going to those two losses they had against the Rams and the Seahawks, those two teams racked up a pretty good score on them. And that kind of flip-flopped the way they were looking at the bye week. They went into that bye week. Well, 2 weeks prior, they were 4-1, and they went into the bye week 4-3 and had to do a lot of reflecting and came out and pulled off a big win over the Las Vegas Raiders, 30-29, in a tough game in Las Vegas. Give them that, but probably shouldn't have been that close. And if it's not for that knockdown at the end of the overtime, on fourth down, well, no, it wasn't a fourth down. The Raiders had scored a touchdown. They went for the 2-point conversion to win the game. The ball gets knocked down, but if it doesn't get knocked down, Lockett is standing in the end zone. Nobody's even near him. He would have caught it, and the Raiders would have won that game, but they didn't. So the Jaguars are now 5-3, 2 games behind the 7-2 Colts. Houston Texans have to win if they have any chance, hope to have any chance to win the division or make the playoffs. Let's move on to the last division in the AFC, and that's the AFC West. This changed quite a bit. The Kansas City Chiefs going into this week were just 1 game back of the Chargers and the Broncos. And actually, they were tied with the Chargers. They were both 5-3, but the Chargers had beat the Chiefs, so they were in second place. Broncos were 6-2. And the Broncos win, the Chargers win, and the Chiefs lose. Raiders lost as well. They're 2-6, but they're kind of out of it. So you got a 3-team race here right now. Broncos are 7-2. Chargers are 6-3, and the Kansas City Chiefs are 5-4. And after 9 games, if the playoffs were to start today, the Kansas City Chiefs would not be in the playoffs. That's amazing. And they're right now 2 games out of first place in their own division. The Chargers are sitting pretty good at 6-3 because they're 3-0 in the division. They've beaten every team in the division, including the Kansas City Chiefs and Broncos. The Chiefs is a big one because they hold that game. Even if the Chiefs were to tie them, the Chargers have the advantage as far as that goes. So you got a very close division. The Denver Broncos won another close game Though they have a pretty decent points for and against, 225 for, 166 against, but they did have another comeback like they did the previous week. So it shows the resilience of that team. You like their defense. Defense is keeping them in the game. The Chargers, the same thing, not to the same degree though. They've been kind of a hot and cold team. I don't know what to think of them right now. Their defense seems to look pretty good at times, but then on other times, not so much. Chiefs' defense is good. Their offense seems to be good, but they got knocked down a peg here. If you listen to, like I talked about yesterday, the way commentators talk about them, they're back. They're back. They're a 3-game winning streak. They are back. They're going to win every game they're going to play. And that didn't happen. Got beat. And Buffalo pretty much handled them the entire game, really, honestly. 27-20, it looked closer, but it didn't seem that way at all. It really seemed like the Bills had control of that game the entire game. All right, let's move over to the NFC and look at the NFC East. Philadelphia Eagles now are running away with this. It had gotten tight when the Eagles were 4-0, lost 2 games in a row, just like the Buffalo Bills, and now have been on a 2-game winning streak. And in the meantime, every team in their division has lost 2, 3, or 4 games. So when it looked tight for a bit there now, everybody's dropped back. Eagles are 6-2. Dallas Cowboys are 3-5-1. The Commanders are 3-6, and we don't know the situation with their quarterback. And the Giants, who have had no luck at all, play tough. They're 2-7. They play hard, but man, you lose your best wide receiver, your best running back. You've got your rookie quarterback in there. It's just a team with plays hard, but not a lot of talent. So this right now looks like the Eagles have quite a command on this division. It's one of the few that you just have a big lead by one team. I guess you could say that about the Colts over the Jaguars. It's two games, but they haven't played each other yet, so that'll make a big difference. NFC North. This is one of the tightest. Green Bay Packers managed to lose again, this time to the Carolina Panthers. They look good. They beat the Detroit Lions, and then they lose. They've lost they tied Dallas, unbelievably, and they lost to the Cleveland Browns, and now the Carolina Panthers. I mean, what is that? While the Detroit Lions are another enigma, they lost as well. They're 5-3. So you got the Green Bay Packers 5-2-1, Detroit Lions 5-3, Chicago Bears 5-3, and the Minnesota Vikings 4-4. Such a tight division. So despite the Minnesota Vikings being in last place at the moment, they do have in the division. They're 2-0 in the division, so that could help them at some point as the season goes on. So this is an amazing division here, very, very close. And they all still have to play each other again. So we'll see what happens as the season goes on. But no one has better than the Chicago Bears and Minnesota Vikings have a 1-game winning streak. The Packers and Lions have a 1-game losing streak. I don't know what to think about these teams. Detroit Lions have looked good. And in fact, I thought they were back on track after losing their first game of the season to the Packers. And then it looked pretty good. 1 loss in there. But that was to the Chiefs, I believe. So you figure, well, that's a good team. But then they lose again, to the Vikings. And I did not expect that. So a very tight division. This is going to probably come down to the wire. And we could see a couple of teams make it into the playoffs out of this division. But let's see if any of these teams can put us the second half of the season together and come out and just pull away from the rest of the teams. We'll see if that can happen or not. All right, let's look at the NFC South. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 6-2. And then to me, the surprise team of the year, the Carolina Panthers are 5-4. Atlanta Falcons are 3-5, and the New Orleans Saints are 1-8. So the Buccaneers have they're just one game lead over the Carolina Panthers. Actually, a game and a half because they played one fewer games than the Panthers. I would have not guessed. The Jaguars beat the Panthers in the first game of the season, and it was pretty easy. So I did not expect much out of the Carolina Panthers, and yet they have put together a decent record. They're 5-4. I'm really impressed with, when you look at the talent. To me, it's okay. Their defense is okay. Their offense is just okay, barely that. But they do have Rico Dowdle, and he's been impressive. And Bryce Young's playing well enough, not great, but well enough. And maybe it's some of the teams they've played as well, but they have, they've beaten some teams. So they're 5-4. Atlanta Falcons 3-5, like I said. So they're bringing up third place. They're not completely out of it, but they're 0-2 in the division, while the Panthers are 1-0 and the Buccaneers are 2-0. They're going to have to do better. Unfortunately for them, the Falcons were 3-2, and they've been on a 3-game losing streak. They did play a close game last weekend, but not good enough to win. So looks like it could be a race between the Buccaneers and the Panthers, believe it or not. If the Panthers can stay in it and actually make the playoffs, I would almost, and we'll have to see what other coaches do and what other teams do, but I'd almost give them that coach of the year. All right, last division, NFC West. This is another tough one. Arizona Cardinals are in last place. They did win their game. Every team in this division won. Seattle Seahawks are 6-2 in first place because they have beaten the Rams. The Rams are 6-2. The 49ers are 6-3. And the Arizona Cardinals are 3-5. All the teams won. The Seahawks and the Rams are both on 3-game winning streaks. And looking impressive. So you got 3 teams with 6 wins already. This is going to be an incredibly tough division. And I fully expect 2. Who knows? There could be 3 teams out of this division that can make it to the playoffs. The Seahawks defense is good. So is the Rams. They're both good. They both have good offenses, good quarterbacks. I wasn't so sure about Sam Darnold for the Seahawks, but he's proven that he's a worthy quarterback and he's going to be good for their team. They got Walker for running back and Charbonnet, and then they've got Jackson Smith and Jigba for wide receivers, so they got a lot there. And then the Rams have Stafford, which was questionable because of his back issues going into the season, but he's looked unbelievably good as well. And their defense is excellent too. They've only given up 127 points this season, while they've scored well over 200, as have the Seahawks. And then the 49ers are 6-3, despite the myriad of injuries. They've been playing a backup quarterback who's played well for the most part. And then Kittle's out. Wide receivers are out. They've lost their 2 best defenders for the season on defense. So still, they seem to be able to hang in there at 6-3. They get all these players back, or a lot of them back. Ayuk hasn't even played yet. They could be impressive. And right now, player of the year to me could be Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers. He's been their best receiver, their best running back. And so he's just been racking up the yards from scrimmage. All right, so that's a look at all the divisions in the NFL. Got some super good races in most of them. Only a couple maybe where it's not that close. A couple of surprise teams like the Panthers as far as winning, and the Chiefs as far as losing. What's going to happen with them. All right, so you can find this podcast on YouTube. If you want to watch it, I'll have all the charts up that I've been talking about or mentioning. When I did the top 10s, I don't list all the top 10s, but you can see who the top 10 players are and what their numbers were. If you'd like that, you can do that at Just the Stats NFL on YouTube. And you can also obviously just listen to the audio. You can do that on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or whatever app you might use. And please like and subscribe to the podcast. Appreciate that. You can also contact me by email if you'd like at justthestatsnfl@gmail.com. If you got any questions, you can also, of course, leave questions or comments in the comment areas of the different places you might listen or watch the podcast. So again, thanks for listening. And that is a wrap for NFL Top 10s for Wednesday. I'm out.